Hello, Internet! Welcome to the very first Popcorn Culture vlog. So today on Popcorn Culture, we are going to discuss The Dark Knight Rises. Specifically, the two saving graces of this particular movie. I want to preface this by saying that this is not spoiler-free, and I have not read a Batman comic book ever. So I don't really understand any of the story arcs or canon that this was based off of. But that's okay, because I'm a fan. I want to start off by talking about the major theme of The Dark Knight Rises. Christopher Nolan has gone on record saying that the theme of Batman Begins was fear, the theme of The Dark Knight was chaos, and now the theme for The Dark Knight Rises is pain. Thanks, Nolan, but you only talked about all three of those things in each respective movie about 1,000 times. I really like Christopher Nolan as a director. I loved Inception, and I liked the two beginning movies of this trilogy. But I think he has a habit of underestimating his audience and sort of bludgeoning us to death with the themes of his movie. A lot of the things that happen in Batman Begins sort of connect to The Dark Knight Rises. So I rewatched it recently, and honestly all they talked about was fear. Facing your fear. And in The Dark Knight, obviously, the Joker was chaos incarnate, and he talked about it all the time. But I do have something bad to say about assuming that your audience is so dumb that you have to talk about your theme, the theme of your movie, blatantly and openly. It's insulting. And, you know, in The Dark Knight Rises, pain is such an obvious thing. You have Batman walking around on a cane and hobbling around, and, you know, he goes to the doctor, and the doctor says, oh, you don't have any cartilage in your knees, and, you know, your brain's all scrambled, and your spine's fused, and all this other stuff. And then you have Bane, who walks around with a tarantula vagina on his face, constantly pumping anesthetic into his system. You have Alfred talking about the pain of burying members of the Wayne family. It's Nolan, we understand, okay? And that was a major failing of the movie, and I think it was a major failing of all of Nolan's movies. He just sort of smacks you in the face with the theme of the movie until you just kind of want to die. I want to talk about the two successes of the movie. And honestly, to me, the two successes of the movie were Bane and Catwoman. I liked Bane because as much as I just complained about the theme of the movie being so obvious, he was so obvious, and he was very easy to understand. And he was pain incarnate, and he was tough and scary, and he looked scary. The only thing about him that wasn't scary was his voice, which sounded like Jimmy Stewart trying to do a Sean Connery impression. Oh, no one cared about me until I put on the mask. Oh! With Bane, I feel like the whole chaos theme from the second movie sort of spilled into this one with the stock exchange and the eventual hostile takeover of Gotham. And that was nice. It was nice to see, and I think it was a nice subtle nod at the Joker because Nolan and the rest of the producers and writers have decided not to mention the Joker at all, as out of respect for Heath Ledger. And that was nice. It was good of them. He brought fear from the first movie too, because he was terrifying. He was a terrifying guy. And you know, he breaks Batman's spine. And I think that was another blaring allegory for pain, and I want to point out that I will suspend my disbelief for a lot of things in comic book movies. You know, that Harvey Dent's burns could be so perfectly symmetrical. That someone would want to steal boots with, you know, like 7-inch knives strapped to their feet. But I cannot bring myself to believe that you can will yourself into healing from a back injury in 3 months. they said, literally, your vertebrae sticking out of your back. That sort of stuff takes at least a year to heal from. And if they're trying to say, oh, Batman pushed himself through the pain, no, he probably would have permanently paralyzed himself, and no more Bat movies. But back to Bane being one of the successes of the movie. So Bane manages to stay a step ahead of Batman no matter what Batman does. And this, I think, is a failing of the movie. I find that all these villains outsmarting Batman, it doesn't endear me to Batman. It just sort of makes me want to punch Christian Bale in his weird mouth. I really want to talk to you guys about Catwoman, because as a feminist, I thought that I was going to want to take a spork to my eyeballs when I met Catwoman. But I was pleasantly surprised. Catwoman was tough and wily and smart, and that seems like an almost impossible order for a female character in a comic book movie. And I think that it's worth noting that a lot of comic book movies lately have sort of begun to treat their female characters with a little bit more respect. And I think this is because there are a lot more female fans. There's a bigger female fan base now. There's a lot more female feedback coming in from these movies. Instead of making these women helpless or wearing skin-tight uniforms that are totally, impractical for crime fighting, they managed to make Catwoman actually a relatable, cool character. I was extremely pleasantly surprised by her outfit, which I thought was just going to be boobs and butt all the time. And I didn't really think that the outfits and the shots that they decided to use were fan service. I actually thought that her uniform and her, leotard thing, they were all it worked, and they were all for a purpose, and that was really nice to see. One of the main reasons I didn't want to see this movie was because they gave Catwoman ears. But I rescind any earlier negative comments about Catwoman's ears, because they weren't just ears, they were goggles. And that was kind of cool. Okay, so let's talk about Blake. So, Blake was a really awesome character. I kind of thought that they stuck him in as another relatable character. And that's fine, because there were a lot of unrelatable characters. There are a lot of unrelatable characters in comic book movies. Bruce Wayne is a billionaire. The only person who really understands what it's like to be a billionaire is Mitt Romney. So Blake was sort of an everyman, he's a good cop, and he reacts so badly when he finds out that Commissioner Gordon has been lying. You can tell that he really cares about the city and what happens to it. And when we found out that his name was Robin at the end of the movie, that's the only time I ever fangirled over a Batman movie, ever. I squealed. I was so excited. But what this leaves me wondering is he going to just be Batman? Is Christian Bale coming back? And I have read that Christian Bale would not do a Batman movie if Robin was involved. So I'm thinking no. But that was a really exciting part of the movie, and I was really kind of pumped for it. I really don't have much to say about the plot, because I thought it was sort of weak. I thought it was maybe the weakest part of the movie. It worked as the ending of a trilogy. The movie was visually stunning. The scene where the football stadium implodes. Awesome. And, they had all the bridge scenes and the desert scene from the pit. I really wasn't concerned about the scenery. It was the plot that sort of did it for me, didn't do it for me. Plot makes or breaks a story, and Batman sort of never really has a good plot. Before we go, I want to explain why I'm not a Batman fan, why I'm not a Bat fan, as it were. In my next video, I really want to talk about heroes and why we need them, because there have been so many superhero movies this summer. There's more coming out. So, I like heroes that I can relate to. I like heroes that I can root for. I like clear good and evil drawn in the sand sort of things. And I think that that's the best way to do a hero. You need a hero that's easily identifiable. That's the hero. And this is the villain. And this is why we should root for the hero and not the villain. And I feel like in Batman, a lot of times you end up rooting for the villain. The villain's more interesting. The villain has a better plan. And, you know, I think that's a little morally irresponsible. When you make someone root for the villain, when you make someone root for the bad guy, not a bad guy trying to do good, or, you know, a criminal who's trying to, you know, pay for his kids' cancer treatment like the Sandman, or, you know, I'm thinking of Constantine, where he's really not a nice guy, but he does good things. When you have someone who just does bad things, and you make the audience root for them, lines start getting blurred. That's why I feel, you know, in The Dark Knight, everybody loved the Joker. But the Joker isn't a good role model. I don't want to root for the bad guy. I want to root for the good guy. So, in conclusion of the very first Popcorn Culture vlog, I give Batman The Dark Knight Rises 3.5 stars out of 5. Plot could have used some work. Excellent characters. Excellent casting choices. And it fit very well as the end of a trilogy. So, before I go, I want to say follow me on Twitter, follow me on Tumblr, and very special thanks to my best friend Tom for the name of this vlog. There's a link to follow Tom on Twitter in the description as well. Thanks, guys! Hello, Internet. This is the This is the first video I'm trying to make with my dog barking at me!